The day I met Luke in our college lecture hall, I knew he was the man I wanted to spend my life with. He was gentle, sincere, and had a childhood best friend named Amy, a lively, cheerful girl with a bit of a wild streak. From the very beginning, their close bond made me feel a little uneasy. How could a man be that close to another woman like siblings without any deeper feelings getting involved? But all my worries were quickly put to rest. Luke and Amy always insisted that their relationship was purely platonic, completely innocent. There was no ambiguity, no crossing of boundaries ever Amy even became my friend. She stood before the flower arch at my wedding, to Luke smiling as she read her heartfelt blessings for us. From parties to family trips, Amy became a natural part of our lives. And when the children came along first, mine, then Amy's, we grew even closer, like one big extended family. Yet there was always this small, just small, lingering feeling deep inside me over the years. Amy never had a steady boyfriend. Every time she announced another pregnancy, I couldn't help but wonder, even if just for a fleeting moment, who is the father? But then I would quickly push the thought away, scolding myself for being petty and suspicious. Amy said she didn't know who the fathers were, and strangely, she didn't seem to care much either. She decided to raise her children alone. No titles, no men involved. We, Luke, myself, and even my in-laws, naturally extended our support to Amy housing. Finances, childcare, we shared everything generously. None of us, at least as far as I believed, felt burdened or questioned Amy's intentions. She needed help, and we were able to give it. But those small things, Luke spending the night at Amy's house, his visits that lasted longer than they should, the look in his eyes when he watched Amy's kids, they quietly stacked up over the years. I comforted myself, if something were truly wrong, surely I would sense it. Surely as a wife, as a mother, I would feel it in my bones. And yet all the excuses I had built in my mind began to tremble as the children grew older. There were moments when seeing Tom Amy's oldest smile, it was like looking at a young Luke. There were times when Kaylee sneezed from allergies, the exact rare genetic condition Luke had, and when the twins Adam and Jenna were born with features so unmistakably familiar, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. Still, I stayed silent. I smiled, helped Amy throw birthday parties, watched Luke care for her children like a devoted father. I told myself, maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe it's just deep friendship. But inside, the questions kept knocking louder. If Amy wasn't truly looking for love, and if Luke was always there for her whenever she needed, then could it be he was the only man she chose to have her children with? My silence over the years became like a fragile bridge stretched over a deep canyon, a bridge that just needed a single gust of wind to collapse. And then that gust finally came in the form of Tom, and the longing look he gave my daughter. I had always believed I could contain the swelling insecurity inside me as long as I stayed silent, as long as I pretended nothing was wrong. Everything would continue to flow smoothly, just as it always had. I didn't want to be the one to shatter this family bond. I didn't want to be the one to blow apart the near blood relationship between our two families. But Tom had grown up, and so had Sophie. The day Tom asked Sophie out, I froze. It wasn't because she didn't have the right to explore her feelings. It was because in that moment, all my darkest suspicions came rushing back to life. If my instincts were right, Tom was Luke's illegitimate son, and that would mean my daughter Sophie had unknowingly become the target of her own brother. Sophie, in her innocence and radiant youth, had no idea. To her, Tom was just a familiar sweet boy who had always protected and cared for her since they were little. She came to me eyes shining with hope, waiting for my nod of approval. I had to suppress 1,000 emotions and force out the most reasonable excuse I could muster. You're still too young and Tom is much older. The lie caught in my throat. But I had no other choice. And from that moment, everything only got worse. Tom didn't give up. Even though Sophie initially obeyed me and turned him down, they still found ways to be together, hanging out under the pretense of being just friends, meeting in groups, then slowly drifting off to be alone. I watched every move, every glance they exchanged, and the fear inside me grew. By the day I saw Tom looking at Sophie with eyes that were no longer just admiring, but longing possessive. I saw Sophie trying to act casual, but blushing every time she was near him, her eyes sparkling. I wasn't just worried, I was panicking. I tried to talk to Luke. I used the gentlest words I could. I said I was worried about Sophie, that Tom seemed to be paying her a little too much attention. Luke agreed, but simply said, "They're young. It'll pass." He didn't seem rattled at all. No signs of a man hiding a devastating secret. That made me even more furious. If Luke was guilty, he was an incredible actor. And if he was innocent, then why did I feel so utterly betrayed Amy too? When she heard about Tom pursuing Sophie, she just gave a small, dismissive laugh. "They're just kids," she said, with no hint of worry or fear like mine. Her indifference cut me like a knife. Maybe Amy already knew the truth, knew that relationship could never truly happen, and was simply waiting for time to erase these youthful emotions. But I couldn't just stand by. I couldn't sit idly and wait for the day my daughter would bring me a child who would be both my grandchild and my step-grandchild. The sleepless nights began. I frantically monitored every meeting, finding subtle ways to keep them apart, without making Sophie rebel. I forbade within reason, terrified that if I clamped down too hard, she would rebel even harder, running straight into Tom's arms like a moth to a flame. I was trapped in a snare woven by my own silence. And worst of all, I knew deep down if I was right. If Tom really was Luke's son, then Sophie's first love wasn't just a mistake. It would be an irreparable tragedy, a wound that would never heal. I thought that with time, Tom's youthful infatuation would simply fade away, that Sophie would become too busy with school, with her dreams of youth, and forget this innocent flutter of first love. But reality was far harsher. Tom didn't back off. If anything, he seemed to fall even deeper for her. He persistently sought every opportunity to be near Sophie despite my careful watchfulness. And worse, Sophie, though maintaining the pretense of just friends, was starting to open her heart to him. The way she smiled, the way her eyes sparkled every time Tom texted or dropped by, it all tightened a painful knot in my chest. Day after day, I had planned to turn a blind eye until I witnessed it myself. Tom placed his hand on Sophie's back during a small gathering at Amy's house. A light touch seemingly harmless, but in his gaze, I saw far too much. Sophie didn't pull away, not a single sign of resistance. That night, I barely slept at all. Fear, anger, and despair twisted through my mind. I no longer knew what was right and what was wrong. I had prayed that I was just being paranoid, that these terrifying thoughts were nothing but twisted figments of an overprotective heart. But every action, every glance, every smile between those two kids pulled me closer to the edge. Luke knew, Amy knew. They both agreed Tom should not pursue anything further with Sophie. They promised they would talk to their child, but their indifference drove me insane. They treated it like a harmless teenage crush. They couldn't or wouldn't see the deeper reality. They were turning away, burying the truth under a thin layer of lies. And I couldn't. Because deep down I knew. If my suspicions were true, Tom and Sophie shared a bond of blood that could never be undone. They weren't just childhood friends. They weren't just close neighbors. They were half-siblings. And yet I couldn't bring myself to say it. I couldn't throw that devastating truth into the lives of the people I loved. I had played out the scene in my mind hundreds of times, the confession exploding into sobs, the horrified looks on the kids' faces, the irreversible collapse of innocent hearts. With just one word from me, my family, the life I had spent years building and protecting, would shatter into pieces. I hated my own cowardice. I questioned myself every night. Was I being too weak, too selfish by keeping silent and allowing my daughter to drift toward an unimaginable tragedy? Had I made a mistake the very first moment I chose to trust in the harmless friendship between my husband and Amy? Every day I felt myself inching closer to the brink. I watched Sophie grow radiant and pure, unaware that one wrong decision could forever destroy her youth. I looked at Tom, the boy I had once cradled and loved as my own, and saw nothing but betrayal, secrets, and heartbreak. I know that sooner or later I will have to face the truth, but how and when, I still don't have the answer. I can't even count how many times during those endless sleepless nights I nearly jumped out of bed, stormed over to Luke, and screamed all my suspicions right into his face. So many times I imagined Amy collapsing at my feet, sobbing and confessing every last sin. But in reality, I stayed silent. because deep down I knew the moment I spoke a single word, there would be no way back. That silence is killing me a little more each day. I've become hypersensitive. Every time Luke leaves the house to help Amy with something, or even just to visit the kids, it feels like I'm sitting on a bed of coals. Every text, every phone call from Amy tightens a knot in my chest. And every time I see Tom and Sophie laughing together so freely as if the whole world has disappeared and there's only the two of them left, an unspeakable pain twists inside me. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I'm the woman who once took pride in being calm and rational, now secretly check Luke's phone, scrutinize every glance, every tone of his voice. I overanalyze the way Amy hugs the children, the way Luke ruffles their hair. I hunt for signs of guilt in every small gesture. But Luke is just too calm, too natural. If he's guilty, then he's been hiding it flawlessly for over a decade. And that thought drives me insane. The harder I search for proof to convince myself, the deeper I fall into a never-ending spiral. There's nothing certain, yet nothing can erase the doubt in my heart either. Each day, that doubt chips away at my trust like a tiny cut, slow but unbearably painful. Until one day I realized I can't wait any longer. Sophie and Tom are growing closer. Outwardly, they're still just friends. But I can see the lingering glances, the unconscious touches, the late-night secret texts, and I know it would only take one more step for their relationship to cross a line that could never be undone. Part of me wants to believe that if I just stay quiet, time will dull this infatuation, that Tom will grow up and drift away from Sophie, that Sophie will meet someone else, someone right, someone pure. But the other part, the desperate, clear-eyed part, screams at me. I'm gambling with my daughter's future just because I'm too afraid to confront the truth. I've thought about secretly ordering a DNA test. I've thought about hiring a private investigator. I've even thought about leaving Luke, taking the kids and running far, far away just to escape this filthy web. But every time I look at Owen, my 12-year-old son who idolizes his father more than anything in the world, I freeze. How could I destroy the safe, happy world my children live in? How could I rip away the image of the perfect father from their hearts, based only on suspicions with no solid proof? If I speak, everything will collapse. My family. Amy's family. The childhoods of all our kids. Everything we've built together over the past decade and a half. But if I stay silent, I am letting an unspeakable sin continue unchecked, and one day I might watch the daughter I love most in this world fall into a tragedy beyond saving. I can't wait any longer. A decision has to be made, and I know whatever path I choose, the cost will be nothing short of devastating. I used to think that when pushed to the edge, I would somehow know what to do, that once every path was blocked, I would find a way out. But standing now at the fragile brink of collapse and silence, I finally understood not every choice leads to freedom. Some roads, no matter which direction you take, are lined only with pain. That day, everything shattered in a way I never expected. I walked into the living room and happened to catch Tom and Sophie sitting close together on the sofa. Tom was gently stroking Sophie's hair, whispering something that made her laugh, her eyes sparkling. The space between them was too close, too intimate. Not the kind of innocent friendship I had once believed in. A surge of fury rose within me. Wild, uncontrollable. "Sophie!" I called out sharply, my voice slicing through the room like a knife. She flinched and turned toward me while Tom quickly pulled away. Both of them looked startled, guilty, as if they had been caught doing something forbidden. I looked into Tom's eyes, those of a lovesick teenager, but to me, they were the eyes of disaster. I looked at Sophie, her cheeks flushed with confusion, not understanding why her mother was so furious. In that moment, I saw the future shatter into pieces, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. That night after the kids had gone to bed, I pulled Luke into the living room. I didn't bother trying to stay calm. I didn't hide the rage that had been simmering inside me for years. "You need to tell me the truth." I said each word heavy as it dropped to the floor. "Amy, her kids, are they yours?" Luke froze. He looked at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But he didn't deny it, not immediately. He didn't laugh it off the way I had always desperately hoped he would. He just stayed silent. A silence so long and heavy, I thought I might scream, "I've suspected it for years." I continued, my voice breaking. I stayed quiet for the kids, for this family, but I can't anymore. Not when Tom and Sophie... Luke clenched his fists, his eyes filled with tears, and finally he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Just one nod. But it was enough to obliterate everything I had been holding on to. I collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. Everything inside me crumbled. Love, trust, family gone in a single breath. Luke fell to his knees beside me, begging to explain that it had happened just once years ago in a moment of weakness. That he had tried to make up for it by standing by Amy, by being a friend, a protector. That he never imagined things would go this far, but his words were nothing more than distant echoes now. Nothing could erase the brutal truth staring me in the face. Tom was Luke's son, and Sophie, my daughter, had unknowingly fallen for her own half-brother. There was no other choice. I would have to tell the truth to Sophie, to my children, even to Amy if necessary. I would have to tear away the mask that had covered our lives for so many years. I would have to bear the pain, watch the heartbreak unfold, see the innocence drain from their trusting eyes, because if I stayed silent any longer, I would lose everything. That night, sitting alone under the pale yellow light, staring into a starless black sky, I realized some truths, no matter how cruel, must be spoken, because sometimes the only way to save what little can be saved is to finally let the truth out. Sometimes life places us at crossroads no one ever wishes for, where every step forward carries pain, loss, and harsh truths. I chose to remain silent for many years, hoping that by doing so, I could protect the people I loved. But in the end, I realized true love isn't always about preserving a perfect picture. Sometimes it's about having the courage to face the truth, no matter how brutal it may be. If you're standing at a difficult decision right now, please remember this. Courage isn't always the loud roar in the middle of a storm. Sometimes courage is just the quiet whisper within your heart, saying, "Tomorrow I will try again." And no matter how much falls apart, as long as you keep kindness alive in your heart, you are still walking the right path. This brings our story to an end. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to support us in creating more videos. Thank you for listening. See you next time.